Hello, folks. My name is Justin Moorhead. I'm here with Mitch Evans, and this is the next edition of Hash It Out. So, Hash It Out is a podcast that we started here at Woodlawn, where we want to talk a little bit more about some implications of the most recent sermon that was preached here. So, this is kind of what that would look like. We're not going to retrace the steps of each week's sermon, but we kind of use it as a springboard into some interesting ideas or some good applications. We both have a background in diving, so we like to use springboards as much as we can. That was a joke. Neither one of us have a diving background, as you might have guessed. But this week we are going to talk a little bit more about Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 9 through 20. So from verse 9 on to the end of chapter 2 of Nehemiah is what was preached this week. And so we're going to talk just a little bit more about it. Maybe to start, Mitch, what might be helpful is we've discussed in the past, and I think it's come up even in some of the sermons so far, is that Ezra and Nehemiah, originally one book, but there's a lot of parallel or a lot of commonality in these two characters, Ezra and Nehemiah, and the two stories that are found in the Bible. So maybe just as a good starting point for this week, what are the similarities there? How do we consider them together?
Yeah, so Ezra and Nehemiah both led a group of people, Ezra even more so than Nehemiah, to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, the temple. So the short of it is, the place had been decimated by war. And they won't feel called by God, and they very much are, to go back and say, we want to start by rebuilding the temple and rebuilding this city. Yeah. And so God has them both on different aspects of this rebuilding mission. So they're both trying to lead the people, but they do so from different vantage points at multiple points in time. On the one hand, Ezra is more of a preacher, pastor type, whereas Nehemiah is a politician, and he's able to kind of grease the wheels of the political endeavor that would be necessary to see a significant building project be undertaken. So very different walks of life, different approaches, but we get to see kind of compare and contrast in their stories being side by side biblically. Yeah.
So with Ezra being more the preacher-pastor type, Nehemiah more the politician, but that wouldn't be at the exclusion, would you say, at the other end of each of or the other side of each of those coins? So like Ezra, was he involved with working with government at all? Was like Nehemiah, we've been talking a lot about him being the cupbearer of King Artaxerxes. Was their king involved with Ezra? Those sorts of things. And with Nehemiah, did he have this pastoral component? Did he have a concern for God's word? Those sorts of things.
Yes, both are true. So Ezra is willing to receive some, you might say, federal money, state-funded money, but he really wants to he's very guarded about what they receive, how it gets used, all these sort of things. However, his primary concern is we need to be following the Bible. Nehemiah also has a primary concern, we need to be following the Bible, but he's way more creative in his approach of how we can use things just in the world, in business, and in government to aid this effort. And so there are distinctives. So one that we've kind of been kicking around, I know, to draw out that I think is fascinating. It came up from Nehemiah chapter 2, where we preached from yesterday. It says in verse 9, Nehemiah speaking, then I, Nehemiah, came to the governors of the province, so that area that's been war-torn, where Jerusalem is, beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. So he has permission, he's got the right permits. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen. So he's willing to take a military escort as he goes in. Whereas Ezra, on this exact same point, said, no, I don't want to take a military escort because I think that'll miscommunicate that God is the one who provides for us. This comes in Ezra just a few pages prior. Ezra chapter 8, verse 22 and 23. Really, we just read 22 for our purposes. He says, for I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way, since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him. So he said, we don't want a military escort because we want to demonstrate to the king, God will protect us. And so you have this kind of the juxtaposition of who did it right
Sure.
Right? Was it wrong on Nehemiah's part not to trust God? Or was Ezra misguided and God could work through a military escort just like he could work without it? And so you have two very different positions. Ezra says, we want to go and allow, Ezra says, we want to go and allow God to be our safety.
Sure.
And we're going to trust him exclusively. Nehemiah does not really comment on it at all, other than to say, the king offered a military escort. We took him up on it.
Sure.
So there, you could see maybe Nehemiah was doing it wrong.
Well, my thought was in verse 22, in Ezra 8:22, we just read, I was ashamed to ask the king for this escort.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's strong, I would say, if that's a comment on Nehemiah's decision.
Yeah.
Ezra's saying, I was ashamed to do this thing. Nehemiah's saying, all good, better for us. Let's roll. So do you think Ezra would have thought Nehemiah was being unfaithful in that way?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because Nehemiah doesn't show up. He shows up during Ezra's tenure. So Ezra is already in Jerusalem. Nehemiah shows up. So you would imagine Ezra clearly sees you showed up with the military escort. The cool thing about it is, biblically, there's no friction at this point. Okay. The Bible doesn't shy away from presenting friction when it occurs. At this point, there's no friction, and they end up working together pretty seamlessly. So I would say the biblical answer is they're both right.
Right.
They both had their reasons. They're both right. But it really bleeds into like our time and place. Should a Christian take government aid?
Right.
Where would you draw those lines? I think there's a lot to discuss. So I'll give you kind of like an insider one.
Sure.
For pastors. Probably most people don't know this. Pastors can totally opt out of paying Social Security and FICA, all that big section of your paycheck that comes out. If a pastor wants to, he can say, I don't want to pay that because of this Ezra principle.
Really?
So they can say, you're thinking, why am I paying taxes?
Interesting.
Yes. So they say, the government shouldn't be providing for me.
Yeah.
I'm convinced, like Ezra was, that my provision should come from the Lord. And so they think, I don't need, so they're opting out of Social Security. They're opting out of any kind of Medicare or Medicaid that may potentially come along. They would be opting out of other government programs like WIC. So they still would pay income tax, but those things that are supposed to provide retirement and health care and all that kind of stuff. They're saying, I don't want that. I'll still pay the income tax I owe, but those things, I'm not going to pay into it, nor do I want benefits.
Nor do I want benefits. I mean, you're doing this at your own expense. Or in a similar way, or maybe the other side of that, I don't think it's uncommon in conservative Christian circles to hear a lot of critique. The idea that you would receive government money, or this idea of support that would come from funds that were taxed on the one portion of the population that you're benefiting from now, I think is a common critique of a lot of conservative Christians. Would Nehemiah serve as a corrective to that critique and say, well, not so fast? Nehemiah is certainly presented as a positive actor in this, and he's absolutely using the support of the government.
I think you mean did you say Nehemiah?
Nehemiah.
You did say Nehemiah.
Did you think I said Nahum?
I don't know what I thought. So I was going Ezra. Sorry. Yeah, so I think you're right. So maybe all cards on the table. I knew I could opt out of those taxes. Purposely chose not to. Because I actually believe, in my instance, it's more closely aligned to Nehemiah. I think that God can work through the provision that the government makes.
Sure.
Just like he could work through some other means, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So I think Ezra at this point was saying, these are mutually exclusive. We're going to miscommunicate something about God by trusting in the king for the military escort.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know that I answered your question or thought.
Oh, no,
totally
I think
responded rightly.
No, I think that does help her answer it. Or even like the Joe Biden, didn't Biden give everybody a decent sized check for something?
And Trump as well,
Trump as well, yeah. So I mean, if there's any sense in which And I've heard semblances of this elsewhere. They're like, oh, I wouldn't take that or didn't take that or wouldn't use that. Isn't something to kind of derive some virtue from. So it's not especially virtuous to deny support that you could rightly get from the government. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's totally fair. It's totally fair. I think Nehemiah is by no means is just presented as doing something wrong.
Right.
He's not even presented even by Ezra. Right.
Sure.
Ezra is very willing to work with him, work with the guy who was a military escort. We even find out in the story of Nehemiah, Nehemiah never takes aid from the people. He keeps living off of what he and his soldiers and his entourage keep living off of the government support, not the people's support. And he's saying, I didn't want to burden them.
Yeah.
I wanted their funds to go towards rebuilding the city. So we never took money from them. Almost the opposite in totality of Ezra. So I think the Bible's presenting there's a time and a place for both. How does that play out for Christians?
Yeah.
Right, is the key. I'll give you another example. Harvest Hope Food Bank is a place a church can go get food from to disperse to the community.
Yeah.
So the church becomes the middleman.
Right.
Harvest Hope, however, has some stipulations. When you disperse the food to the community, here's what you should say and not say. So now I think you're getting to a more difficult spot. Okay. So we get government-funded food as a resource we can disperse to the community, but they're dictating what we say and we don't say.
Sure.
So I think it would be very plausible for a church to say, oh, no, we want to be able to say whatever we want. So we're going to raise our own food support and support the community like our church does, for instance. So I think that there are times where you have to realize what Ezra was saying also has its time and place.
And even if I'm remembering right, for the end of chapter 2 in Nehemiah, he's replying to this opposition after having kind of utilized the support that he's gotten. Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper. So, I mean, he's not saying Artaxerxes is got our back. Ultimately, he's saying God of the universe is making us prosper through these means, through the means that they have there, or whatever it might be. So in the similar way, if the food bank is saying, well, you can go be a part of this, but you can't say certain things, because we would love to say that the Lord provides through whatever means he provides through, whether it's the government or a good surgeon or this medication, that we can see that God's good hand is at work in that, but not if we allow somebody to tell us what we can say and not say. Then you can't make that claim that it's God who's causing us to prosper.
Absolutely, yeah. And I even think down to the point, some people get reluctant to get help from the government when they say, I feel like I should be getting help from the church. Or even churches say, you should not get help from the government. We need to look out for our own. It's probably both.
Yeah.
I think it would be kind of like those pastors who say, I want no help from the government. I'm not going to pay in, nor do I want anything back. God's going to provide for me.
Sure.
I think it's to misrepresent the means God may use or may not use.
Yeah.
So I think God can use Social Security to be provision in somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's exclusive. So somebody else may feel like, well, I think the church should step up and provide medical assistance.
Sure.
He said, we're going to step up and help provide, but we also would say if they get additional medical assistance from somewhere, that's not a wrong thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a even really a good landing place, and the kind of beauty of seeing these two books that really belong together right next to each other is you see the balance of it, and that it is certainly both. Absolutely dependent on God, absolutely want to see Him provide in these ways, but not limiting Him in the ways in which He can provide for His people, and being open to whatever those means might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Good.
I agree.
Well, hopefully this was helpful for you all. Good discussion. We plan to keep at it, so hopefully you'll join us again next week here on Hash It Out.